One of the most confusing parts of becoming a software developer is knowing when you're ready to actually do the work of a software developer. Like, when are you actually ready to start applying for jobs? And so in this video, what I actually want to cover today is the top signs to know that you're not ready to get out there and start doing the work or start applying for jobs, and to help give you a sense of like what you need to work on. Like, if you are showing any of these signs, then maybe this is a signal to you that you need to go back to the drawing board, or to just make sure that you're working on these things that I'm going to mention. So that's going to be the goal of this video. With that being said, let's dive into it. One of the first things that comes to my mind is that being a bad sign if you're trying to become a programmer is if you can't code in front of other people. You have to be able to code in front of other people during an interview. So I've seen a lot of people who have spent a lot of time coding, but for some reason, when it comes to explaining what they're doing, right, being able to code on the spot, it is a massive struggle for them, either because they don't have the skills, number one, or because they just simply aren't used to doing it and freeze up when that happens, when they're sort of put on the spot and told to do something. So if you're not able to do that, you need to fix that as soon as possible. And the only way you can fix this sort of thing is to practice like the real thing, right? So instead of coding by yourself or in isolation, or if you're doing coding challenges by yourself, figure out ways to put a little pressure on yourself to make yourself a little bit nervous, so that being nervous is not that big of a deal. So if you have other friends who are learning software development, work with them, right? Do coding problems in front of them, pull up HackerRank or LeetCode and talk through while you're trying to create a solution. Or you can also record yourself. So you can use some sort of screen recording software and just make sure to talk out loud while you're actually coding. Again, when you go to an interview, they're going to expect that you're going to talk through with them how you're thinking about the problem. They're going to expect that you can talk about how you're going to come up with a solution if you get stuck, like how you're going to get out of that problem. And this is really weird. Like, even for myself, it's very, very weird for me to do it because I like to think up in here, not necessarily out loud and talk through it. But if you can't do that, that's usually a trouble sign and something that you need to work on. The next sign that you're not ready is a tag along to that. If you can't explain how data flows through your application, that is not a good thing. So this could be for a small project, or it could also be for a big project, right? So take your easiest, most simple application you could think of, right? A to-do application. How does data flow through it? Right? So if you've got like an input box, you type in your to-do and you press submit. How does the data flow through that application? How does it end up getting printed on the screen? And that's a pretty simple application. So you should be able to explain how data flows through there and how it ultimately ends up on there. Like, what functions are called? How does that data get processed? That should be pretty darn simple. So if you can't do that, that's worrisome. Now, on your bigger applications, so let's say you're going to be a full stack software developer and you create a chat application, how does the data actually flow through that application? Can you explain it from a very high level, right? So for example, if I were to explain it, I would say, when somebody logs into a chat application, when we press the send button, when we actually send a message in one of the chat rooms, we make an HTTP post request from the front end. We attach the message data into the body of that message. We send it to our internal API. That API stores that message in the database, and then it broadcasts the message to anyone else who's logged in that somebody has sent a new message, and that gets posted on their screen. To me, that would be a really simple way to explain that. And if you can't do that for some of your more complex, maybe some of your capstone projects, that's also a bad sign. So if you are having trouble with that, try coming up with an explanation, writing it out, and then explaining that to somebody who's maybe a software developer, somebody who can give you feedback on it. But ultimately, you do have to be able to explain how data flows through either simple or some of your complex applications. All right, now real quick, before we move on to our next point here, just an obligatory like and subscribe section. Just make sure to hit the like button, as the YouTube algorithm is very, very hungry. We need to feed that thing so this video gets pushed up and helps more people. Also, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you get notifications anytime I put out a new video. Another worrisome sign to me is not having substantial portfolio projects to show off. So a big part of the process of getting hired as a software developer is that they want to see what you can do, not what you know as far as theory. And for many people that I've seen, they've built a lot of projects, but a lot of them are sort of what you call basic. They're just simple applications along the lines of the to-do application. Maybe they're different flavors of a to-do application, but they're nothing that's really, put a lot of different working parts together. There's no complex logic in there. That type of thing is just not substantial enough for you to get a job. The reason that it's important to have substantial or complex projects in your portfolio that you can show off is because that more closely mimics or simulates what you're going to see in your first position as a software developer. Most applications that are in real life that are something that you're going to work on are many orders of magnitude more complex than what you're building in your portfolio. And so if you're going to be successful in that first position, if that company's going to trust that you can come in and contribute, they're going to want to see something that at least kind of looks complex enough that they could trust that you could do it. So you got to figure out some complex projects. You got to figure out ways to challenge yourself. If you're still at the what I call the to-do app sort of stage, push yourself. Like, find more complicated projects to build. That's going to help you to really build up that track record. Another thing that would worry me about a new developer is if they couldn't debug their applications. Debugging is a critical skill, especially for a new developer. What debugging is it's the ability to trace down or track down an issue in your code and to fix it. And I've created a video, which I'll actually post right here. You can watch it at some point, but I really talk and go into depth about how to be a better debugger. And the reason it's so important is because as a software developer, you're going to constantly run into issues. You're going to constantly run into bugs, problems, and you have to be able to know how to find that and address it. And debugging is about using the right tools for the job. So you need to be able to use the tools for the specific programming language that you're using. I know a lot of new developers love the print statement in Python or the console.log and JavaScript as their ways of debugging, but there are much better tools that you can use to debug your application that you should be using and that you should know about. But even beyond that, there are techniques you can use to be a better debugger as well, and using the process of elimination. But really, the only way you get better at debugging is to create challenging applications, create things that are hard, run into problems, and use the debugging tools and the techniques that you're going to learn to find and address problems and fix them quickly. So if you don't know how to debug, if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch that video that I'll, again, post right here, and make sure that you have some skills there so that you can easily address problems when you need to. The last thing that would really worry me about somebody and would tell me that they're not quite ready is if they haven't recently been doing a lot of coding challenges or coding problems. So take any of the big websites out there. There's Elite Code, there's HackerRank, there's Code Wars. If you haven't recently been diving in and doing a lot of them, then I would say you're actually not really ready to do an interview yet. Most interviews are going to involve some sort of coding problems, coding challenges that come from one of those websites more than likely. And if you're going in cold, if you have never done one or if you haven't done one recently, you're going to find that it's a skill set on its own. Like, you're going to be very, very rusty. So I would say for anybody, you have to get comfortable with doing them. You have to get comfortable with doing it under pressure, right? So imagine that you have an hour to do it, or that there's somebody there watching you, or that, whatever it is, you have to get used to that, because just the coding challenge itself is something to get used to. The wording of it, how the problem is explained, how you work through it, how you get stuck, like all those things you need to practice before you go to an interview and feel pretty good about before you actually do it. Otherwise, the likelihood that you're going to freeze up and sort of not know what to do or spend most of your time trying to figure out what the problem is asking is very, very high. And I even have experienced it myself. Like, if I haven't been practicing it recently, I have no business going for an interview because, well, I'm not going to do very well. My brain is just not going to be acclimated to the coding challenge or the coding problem. So just make sure to be practicing that. Don't cram, just be doing it for about a month before you really start diving in and doing interviews. So those are, I'd say, the most important tips I have as far as knowing that you're not ready to be a software developer. That's all I have for today. By the way, guys, I will leave a link to my coaching program in the description below. If you're interested in joining that, definitely check that out. Other than that, that's all I've got for today. So thank you so much, and peace out, guys.